I'm going 65 miles an hour through a green light. Someone else is going 65 through a red light. My car's totaled. If you saw my truck, you would wonder how I survived.
Jim Donnelly, a U.S. Army veteran, the CEO of Humanaut Health, who started in corporate America, then walked away to build Restore Hyper Wellness and scaled it to one of the largest wellness franchises in the country with 220 plus locations.
My dad dies. I have the accident. I go around the country to fix my body, and the thing that brought me back completely was, the highest level, biggest name professional athlete, some of the biggest name CEOs. It takes about to know how unhealthy they are. Hormones work better when you're healthy. Peptides work better when you're healthy. So if you simply provide those things individually without taking care of the rest of a person's health, I don't think you get the results that you otherwise would.
It's like putting premium gas in a... Hey Traction fam, super excited for today's guest. It's Jim Donnelly, formerly a U.S. Army veteran who started in corporate America, then walked away to build Restore Hyper Wellness and scale it to one of the largest wellness franchises in the country with 220 plus locations.
Yeah, there's 264 now.
And then at the height of that success, you had a near fatal car crash and loss of your father forced you to walk away from everything. And today you're building the future of healthcare. I would say precision regenerative medicine.
Yeah, we call it health optimization with a little bit of longevity sprinkled in. Longevity has a lot of definitions, but we do think it's the way that healthcare should be done. Preventative, proactive, very data-driven, personalized. Predictive, absolutely.
Jim's the CEO of Humanaut Health, having been through my own health transformation, that preventative, predictable healthcare is the way to go. The future of medicine is going to be predicting before it even happens.
Yeah.
And not to just extend your life, because which modern healthcare today as it stands is very good at keeping you alive. Mm-hmm. You'll get into all these bad habits like smoking, drinking, and bad lifestyle.
Yeah.
And you're not going to drop dead at 75.
Yeah.
They'll keep you on a wheelchair from 50 till maybe your 80s, right? And what precision medicine and predictive medicine, preventative, is all about is adding life to your years, not years to your life.
Yeah, the mission of our company is to add 20 good years of living to your life.
High performance living.
High performance living. And if you think about the societal impact of that, not only are we adding 20 years to your life, we're adding it to lives when people are at the peak of their powers. They have the most influence, they have the most resources. So if you can add 20 high performing years to the end of people's lives, you have a massive ripple effect, both for them personally and for society at large.
So with Humanaut Health now, you're not only offering the testing and some of the therapies that are available that we hear about online, but it's also stem cell, regenerative medicine, peptide therapy. Healthcare for entrepreneurs has been broken. Our life is not work-life balance. It's work-life integration.
Yeah.
And we power through the day on caffeine, cortisol, and carbohydrates. We put the business first and ourselves second.
Yeah.
And that works up to a certain point. And then as soon as you have a breather, it tanks.
Yeah.
If your body can't sustain, your business won't sustain in the long term. And I've seen it over and over and over again. The few that carry the weight of the many need a different kind of healthcare. I long believe that entrepreneurs need to be treated like elite athletes, right? An elite athlete has a trainer, a nutritionist, a mental health therapist, a coach, all physician-led to keep them in their prime. And what? Athletes have a 10-year work span. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurs have a 30, 40-year work span, and they piece it together on caffeine, carbs, and cortisol.
I totally agree. And first of all, I'd say the first way to think about Humanaut is that we have solved the entire ecosystem. There are a lot of one-off things for small pieces of it. And whether you're a high-performing entrepreneur or a normal person, piecing it all together is overwhelming and you don't get the best results. So we do bring everything together. We do bring tons of diagnostics so that we get all the data that we need. We take that data and then we give you everything you need foundationally to be healthy. So we address movement, nutrition, sleep, stress reduction, cognitive health. And then once we have that game plan for each quarter, we've got an entire toolkit. So as you said, all the exogenous molecules, hormones, peptides, medications, supplements, regenerative medicine, in-clinic services, so we can get better results. And we track those results. Every quarter, we're going to retest you and make sure we're making progress. And we can't fix everything at once. We have a concept we call Focus 3. We focus on 3 things at a time. And once those 3 things are making progress, at the end of the next quarter, we'll adjust appropriately.
Much like running a company, you teach them, everyone has an operating system for the business, especially high growth startup founders. They don't have one for the body. And this is bringing everything in together. Now, what's really interesting is as we head in the AI future, it's very easy to build another product, right? You use AI agents and your product can be obsolete tomorrow. And I've long believed that to win in the AI future, you can't build a single wedge startup. You need to build a compound startup, like what Rippling's done for the human resources space and is now a $20 billion company. It needs to be done in healthcare where you bring everything together. Because right now, I use an app for nutrition. I use an app for training. I use multiple different apps and multiple different providers in my ecosystem. And managing that is a headache. So if there was a one-stop shop where I come in and I move through the ecosystem based on what I need, I don't have to go anywhere else. And I'm optimized and I can focus on running the business. And it's an operating system for my personal health.
There is so much complexity in this business. First of all, like if you give me 90 seconds to describe Humanaut, easy. But people don't have 90 seconds. So riddle me how you describe health optimization and longevity in 10 seconds. Then you've got all these systems. We have 17 systems that we have to integrate. And none of them speak to each other. None of them are particularly sort of AI friendly. You've got your EHR for your medical stuff. You've got your point of sale system. You've got your CRM. You've got your wearables integrator. I could keep going. And so to pull those all together, put a presentation layer, an AI layer on top of that, and do it in a very helpful way. By the way, we have two customers. We have the consumer who's coming to us, but we also have the clinicians that are providing the care. If you don't create tools for them that help manage this complexity, you got a whole nother problem. And so the nice thing about it is we embrace AI. You have to in healthcare today for all kinds of reasons, but you still need a place where people come. You can't do stem cell injections virtually. You can't do other clinic services virtually. And I do believe fundamentally that when you are dealing with something as impactful and deep as healthcare, people do like to interact with a human at some point. Not all the time, but there is a point where you're looking your doctor in the eye and he is providing the emotional intelligence and all of the other things on top of the care plan that I think is really important for folks. And, you know, AI is doing more and more in the healthcare space, but humans are still very important.
I think most doctors would argue that they went to school to provide care and they got turned into memorization, data collection, and data regurgitation and analysis.
And bureaucrats, like it's the system that they're spending too much time on rather than providing healthcare.
Exactly. Now, AI takes one huge portion of it, right? If you're a physician that's collecting data and analyzing data and repeating and presenting data, I think your job is going to be very limited, or you got to be worried. The best physicians rely on AI to do the heavy lifting and take out the burnout from the profession so they can provide personalized care. What I care about is the relationship and the confidence when I look at the person across. The AI answers I can get putting in multiple AI models. Now, what led you to this? Because you had 220 clinics, you very successful, then you had a car crash. And what led you to then start Humanaut?
There were three things. So right about that time, we took a really large investment from General Atlantic. And so we had gotten to the point when you're that many locations, PE is looking at you. And we had a variety of the top PE firms, TPG, L. Catterton, and General Atlantic that were all looking at investing in Restore. And we had a well over $100 million investment for a minority portion of Restore. So I will say that's great in some ways, but it also changes the day-to-day as a CEO. And to be quite frank, I'm a CEO that likes to build and create and innovate. And when you bring in that much money, even for a minority investment, the expectation is a little different. The way that you operate is a little different. The way you manage is a little different. It became more of a let's innovate less, let's optimize more. And to be quite frank, I don't think we were quite ready to optimize without adding some new things. So you see how fast this category is moving.
Exactly.
And so there's probably a little bit of dissonance there. And to be quite frank, I'm very self-aware and know what I'm good at, know when I'm happy. And so we sat down and said, hey, let's bring in the type of CEO that you want. Now, right before that happened, you alluded to the car crash. So I'm going 65 miles an hour through a green light. Someone else is going 65 through a red light. And that never ends well. My car is totaled. If you saw my truck, you would wonder how I survived, straight in the back of an ambulance, unconscious to the, sort of the ICU. Fortunately, I drive a big truck and I did survive. And to be quite frank, I don't like to overstate it. I wasn't like on life support or anything, but one foot in another direction or two, and I would have clearly been dead. And I had another friend in Austin who worked at a big private equity group, and he had a heart attack right around the same time. And both of us got together and we were like, what are we going to change? And we both had very happy lives, and we looked at each other and said, I don't know that I'm going to change that much, but I am going to look at doing something different professionally. And so you had the PE dynamic, you had the car wreck, and then my dad died of cancer. My dad died of a pretty rare blood cancer. And so I always say Humanaut would not have cured the cancer, but it would have caught it at stage 1 instead of stage 4. And for this particular cancer, stage 4 is a death sentence. So my dad dies, I have the accident, the PE dynamics bubbling up. I go around the country to fix my body, and the thing that brought me back completely was stem cells. And so I did a stem cell procedure on my neck. I did a few of my other joints, my shoulder, my chest, my knees. And to be quite frank, I not only felt better, I felt better than I felt long before the car accident. I had my 30-year-old knees back. I was like, I bet goodness, I don't have any pain. And I went to Ranger school. I played some college athletics. I've had this very active, thrill-seeking life. I'm married to a West Point grad who, ran track at West Point. So we've had this very active, really great life. My 2 kids are very dynamic Division I level athlete kids. So, you're like, holy crap, I'm back. Like Jim D is back, and it felt really good. And so I didn't want to just do a stem cell business for a variety of reasons. I wanted that to be a part of the toolkit, an important part of the toolkit. But I think that the really great healthcare options going forward are going to be the ones that solve more than one problem, that kind of look at all of it together holistically. Stem cells work better, by the way, when you're healthy. Hormones work better when you're healthy. Peptides work better when you're healthy. So if you simply, provide those things individually without taking care of the rest of a person's health, I don't think you get the results that you otherwise would.
It's like putting premium gas in a broken engine.
Yeah.
The engine will just burn through it faster, and you'll need more and more of it.
That's right.
What's very interesting with healthcare, I think healthcare is due for an Uberization or an Airbnbization. Yeah. Airbnb didn't build software for the hotel industry. Yeah. They solved every piece of the supply chain, as did Uber, right? With healthcare, you look at it, if you start with the EHR, it's very insurance and billing focused. Yeah. So as a patient now, I have no access or easy way to query my own data. Yeah. And that's a big problem. And it starts with that experience all the way to how the clinics are structured, where you go in for a once-a-year physical, and the physician, they're billing, they need to see like 30, 40, 50 patients a day to make that money because it's insurance mandated. And they want you in and out of there. So they don't have a personal relationship with you. They don't understand with you. So it's become a feeling of dread. Yeah. And that needs to be turned into a feeling of joy. And you can't just do that by fixing either the software or one stem cell. You got to start all the way and rebuild the whole supply chain.
Well, you mentioned the sort of the health dynamic of entrepreneurs earlier. And so I sort of put that in the adrenal fatigue bucket, where you've been on, again and day after day after day after day. And CEOs and entrepreneurs and lots of high performers wake up and they are literally sort of to the point where their body does not respond the way that it needs to. Now, what I would say is a company like Humanaut, because of all the deep diagnostics that we're going to do, we're going to figure that out pretty quickly and we're going to put you on the right path. Whereas if you went to your doctor, some of the things that are the symptoms, he doesn't have the time to do deep diagnostics, doesn't have the time to sift through them, and doesn't have the insurance incentives to want to solve that problem. And so that's one thing. So we can go really deep because we get the data and look at a bigger picture. Number 2, we use the word fun a lot at Humanaut. Nobody in healthcare uses the word fun. And so I always say it's not roller coaster fun, but it is a much better experience.
It's a feeling of joy.
It's a feeling of joy, engagement. You're a part of it. You're participating. You enjoy coming in. You don't dread coming in. You love the people involved. And there are aspects of fun. So I went on this 7-country tour around the world for work. And every place that I went, our care team provided me a fitness plan, all the way down to the level of detail that the equipment in the hotel, a walking hike that I could do directly from the hotel, the 3 or 4 high-level fitness things that I could do in that city. And so I had a plan for Riyadh, for Mumbai, for Bangkok, for Sydney. No doctor, no healthcare provider is doing. It was literally down to the machines in the gym at the hotel so that I could kind of put my brain on cruise control when it came to my health and focus on the stuff that was the really deep stuff from a work perspective. So, that's the kind of example of fun. You've got to make this fun and engaging. And then the other word that I use, and I always say, if you remember these 2 words, fun and guarantee, it kind of sums up Humanaut. We are launching a healthcare guarantee that if you do certain things, we guarantee we will get certain results. So what are these kind of things? Well, you got to wear a wearable for a certain amount of time. How can we hold you accountable if we can't track movement and sleep and some of your food dynamics? You've got to achieve your goals a certain percentage of the time. By the way, not 100%. That's dreadful. That's not fun. No one's perfect. But there's a certain certain percent that you have to achieve your goals. Consistency. You have to check in once a month. So we have to be able to course correct once a month, at least, to make sure that we're, et cetera, et cetera. There's a few other very interesting components of the accountability protocol. But what happens then is you completely change, when we call them client, not patients, because they're paying 100%. For it. And so our clients, like I've literally heard client after client say, if they don't achieve their desired outcome because they didn't follow through on all the account, they will literally apologize. They'll be, oh, my bad. Give me another chance. Let me try again. And it's because we've got them to buy in up front and we've created accountability, and they know when they didn't do, it's like, yeah, I knew it. My bad. Give me another chance. When you get a client dynamic like that, you've won.
Yeah.
You've won because they're bought in and they really do want to see the results. And, we have things like community. They see the results. They know that Humanaut living creates better results.
And, that's the interesting part, right? And I said it tongue in cheek, like when you're giving your healthcare provider an excuse like the dog ate my homework, the worst is you don't feel accountable to your regular healthcare provider. You don't care.
Yeah. You don't care and they don't care.
They don't care.
To be quite frank.
And that's the worst thing, right? When you deeply care, when you give excuses and emotion, that they care, they're part of a community. And that's what's lacking. The other thing is the framing, right? The framing of client, not patient. We're all clients of the healthcare system. But somewhere along the way, we got treated like patients, which means sick, which means I need you. You don't need me. And when you have that dynamic, that power imbalance, that changes how service is delivered. Everyone starts operating with that mindset, from insurance to hospitals to clinicians. And that needs to change. I had a pretty bad health scare, right? Like my wife, you've met her, Vivetta. She's a professor of medicine at Stanford. When my lungs collapsed, I ended up in her ER. And months after, I had put on a lot of weight, and we asked for specific tests from our insurance healthcare provider, which they refused. So she came out of the system to run all my biomarkers and piecemeal everything to turn me from an overweight with a body of a 75-year-old. My VO2 max was like 26 or 28 to now 55, right? She managed me, but she had to pull in tooling and experts and resources.
Obviously you're lucky. You have a lovely wife who's a Stanford doctor, but most people don't have access to that. So at Humanaut, we say we are that co-pilot for you. We do have a really interesting set of memberships all the way up to a high-level membership. But the thing that gets me out of bed excited in the morning is, ironically, the lowest price membership that we have. That's a membership that a school teacher, that a fireman, that a normal person. And so they get a taste of this high-level health optimization and quote-unquote longevity medicine that has typically been reserved for the sort of Silicon Valley rich guy. That's great. I got a lot of rich people I love. They pay the bills. But I'm more excited about the fact that we can democratize this across a much, much larger segment of the population.
That's where precision medicine is today, right? And a lot of flack, whatever you call it, concierge medicine, precision, it's all in that category of personalized medicine. And it gets a lot of flack because everyone says it's expensive. It's expensive, it's luxury. But what people don't realize is every disruptive, innovative technology,
starts there.
Netflix or Uber or even personal computers, right? It starts very expensive and then it makes its way down because also the current system fights it. There's a couple things, right? So they fight it and there's less adoption. So you got to almost like what Elon Musk did with Tesla, made the supercar, then made the Model S, then made the 3. And so I think precision medicine is on that same sort of cost curve, and it gets eventually democratized with the help of folks like yourself. But you need to have that mindset is, I'm going to make it better for everybody as the cost curve changes.
And I think we have a couple of things in our DNA at Humanaut that's a little different. Restore is in 46 states. And what I always say is I was happy to see that we did just as well in Wichita as we did in Santa Monica. So number one, we sort of crossed this dynamic of anywhere we were, we understood that you had to kind of embrace the community, be a part of it, and not feel like this exclusionary thing out of New York City or LA, kind of fancy, so I think in our DNA, we're really good at whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever socioeconomic level you're at. I think we have that just naturally in our DNA, and that's important. But to your point, you do have to recognize the realities, and sometimes starting with some higher dollar things allows you to open the aperture for the more accessible things.
Once upon a time, ICUs were rare, and now they're everywhere. CT scans were inaccessible. Everything starts expensive, and I think people don't realize this, but that's the movement of technologies. Yesterday's innovation always becomes tomorrow's commodity, and that's the cycle you have to move through. Now, you said community a few times, and I'm a big believer in community. I wrote a Wall Street Journal best-selling book on community. My last business was built on community, and I see that with you as as well. When I moved to Austin, you took me pheasant hunting, and I almost shot a couple people.
I will tell you, that was one of the funniest experiences when you shot that first time at the shotgun with two shells in the chambers, and you sort of slug around, and I had to knock the gun down, and I was
shooting from my hip.
Yeah, and it was shot from your hip, man. I tell you, I love that funny story, and all my gun, friends that thought, oh my gosh, but I loved your enthusiasm, man. And by the end of it, you were shooting pheasants, and
I shot maybe one or one and a half.
You did, and it's what I love about Austin. There's a lot of community things, and the funny thing about me is I almost married a PETA activist back in the day. I think community is a super important thing. Now, I think you got to define community when you're trying to make it a part of your business, and so generally, community is a part of healthcare. I think if you don't have community and purpose in your life, it is hard to be healthy. I actually think that's a foundational thing, and men are particularly bad at it. Mm-hmm. And so set that aside for a second. If that is true, then you have to consciously build ways to help with community. So we have a very active community at Humanaut. On a macro level, it's the kind of inspirational, aspirational part of it. It shows how being a Humanaut manifests and plays out. It shows great examples of people living the lifestyle that have, you'll see a 75-year-old that is doing 40-year-old kind of person things, and you're like, well, that looks pretty good. I want that. And then on a micro level, I think people underestimate that. So this notion of the 5 people you're a product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, I would say your health and your sort of level of performance is also a product of the 5 or 6 people you spend the most time with. So we have a little micro part of the community that we're building out and we'll launch soon, where you can pull your closest people into your healthcare dynamic. Now, they're not going to get your super specific HIPAA protected stuff, but they're going to see the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish. So number one, a lot of times they'll join you and they'll actually become a part of it. Or 2, they at least don't sabotage you. They don't. They know what you're trying to do, and you know how it is if you're trying not to drink alcohol and you go out with a bunch of friends that always drink alcohol. If you tell them, a lot of them will be respectful, but they got to know. If you're trying to change your eating habit, if you're trying to lose weight, like I would always say, if your wife isn't on board, good luck. If your best friend isn't on board, good luck. So we try to find ways to bring them into the dynamic in a fun way that hopefully inspires them to actually become a Humanaut as well.
You're not the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. You're the victim of their bad habits.
Yeah, that's another way of saying it for sure.
I've seen this over and over again. And the home thing is really important because that's your first community.
Yeah.
Right. And willpower breaks under extreme stress. You can have the best will, but at midnight when you're working hard and the pantry is loaded with junk, you're going to reach no matter how hard you try to fight it. And the best performers, they don't let willpower fight the battles that their environment can handle. So I think this is really important. There was a Harvard study done for 75 years, the Harvard adult study, and they found that the one factor beyond everything else, every optimization that was impactful to your health and longevity was your relationships, your community. You can have all the best tools in the world, but if you have shitty, toxic relationships around you that are dragging you, it's going to increase your stress levels. And there was another study done on a gene expression where kindness towards others manifested in reduction of stress and depression more so than self-directed self-care. So those are really important things, and I love that you made it part of the community. Now let's move towards high performers and start with the entire chain of things you're doing for high performers, right? You run a very deep diagnostics process. Walk us through what that looks like and what are all the things you collect.
Yeah, so you're going to come and do, up to 200 blood panels. You're going to do up to 75 bespoke diagnostics. So that's everything from brain EEGs, full body scans, carotid artery scans, DEXA scans, the full movement diagnostics that are given to all the Stanford athletes. You're going to do gut health diagnostics. You're going to do essentially anything that you can do, you have the opportunity to do. And our care team will sort of direct a certain first level of that. And if we find stuff, we'll go to the second level and the third level. So we make sure we can go really deep. So then we take all of that data, we run it through our AI engines. A care plan comes out that covers movement, nutrition, sleep, stress, and cognitive health. The human team reviews that. Now, the good news is thousands of pieces of data have been kind of organized by AI, and there's some additional information that get pulled in. So that same team that previously that would have taken hours, now that takes minutes. Then we sit down with you and we get your sort of approach, what your goals are, and we make sure that's a big part of it, and we try to meet you where you're at. And now for some folks, meeting you where you're at is, I'm very overweight. I'm very unhealthy. We got to start slow. We got to start here. For other folks, it's world-class athletes. And we just brought in, for instance, a high-level human performance part of our business, a guy named Eric Sugarman. He was the head trainer for the Minnesota Vikings for 23 years. He runs essentially the NFL Safety Council. And so he's a very high-level human optimization and human performance level person. So he's in charge of pulling together that next level for the elite athlete. And the elite athlete has a very different set of things. By the way, most elite athlete performance stuff is not necessarily the most healthy way to live. Like a marathon runner.
Yeah.
That is not healthy. So what we're trying to do is work with them in a way that we mitigate some of the stuff that is just, they're not going to stop because they're training, they're performing, but we can mitigate sort of the negative impacts of that. And what we see a lot also is we see athletes after their professional careers. And so, all right, now I'm still going to be a kind of a high performer in my mind, but I'm kind of broken. And so help me get back to as close to that as possible, or at least be healthy. So we see everybody. We see, the highest level, biggest name professional athlete. By the way, some of the biggest name CEOs, and you've seen them on television. It takes about 5 seconds to know how unhealthy they are. They're clearly overweight. You can see it in their eyes. You can see it in their face. That is an unhealthy person that has a lot of resources and a lot of money, but they have kind of lost their way. They're not prioritizing their health in any way.
I find it with myself too, and I think a lot of founders, entrepreneurs are on some level of spectrum that they get hyper focused on one thing and they can't think of the other thing. And you almost have to make it a way of living, almost like eating food, or more importantly, brushing teeth is. Now, with all the therapies that you do, like regenerative medicine, metabolic health, how do you decide what moves the needle when you meet a new client, right? Like in the next 3-6 months, how do you decide like those first three things? Because somebody could come in and be like very vanity focused and like, listen, I need to train for X for a show or whatever. I need a six pack. But how do you actually decide what is going to be most optimal for them in the next 3-6 months?
The diagnostics and data are going to drive what your biggest health issues are. Now, it goes back to what I said, like you're a participant in this. Unlike the traditional healthcare system, you do have some agency. So you will tell us what you're trying to accomplish. In an ideal world, what you're trying to accomplish in your biggest health care issues align perfectly. That's not usually the case. So we will give you some agency to help with the prioritization. We're obviously not going to ignore sort of really big things. So first of all, the very first thing we do is we take the sort of apocalyptic horsemen of death off the table. And so we do cancer screens to make sure you don't have cancer. Obviously, if you have cancer, that's the immediate top priority. We look at your heart health. If you've got some heart health, we're going to prioritize that. By the way, managing heart health and improving heart health is a very, very manageable dynamic. We get great results, even for the hard things like ApoB and these things that previously were said to be unmovable. We get great results moving that. Metabolic dysfunction, obviously, if you have high degrees of that, we're going to solve it. Here's an interesting stat for you. 87% of the clients who come to us with metabolic dysfunction, i.e. pre-diabetic or worse, within 6 months, they have no sign of metabolic dysfunction. Wow. And so that's a massive improvement to what traditional healthcare can deliver. And then the final bucket is neurodegenerative issues. And so a lot of that is much more controllable than people think. So people think, well, one day I hope I don't get Alzheimer's. Well, here's a better strategy than hope. Like there's a lot of lifestyle things that you can do. There's other interventions that we can do. We should know genetically what you have working for you or against you, and we can intervene. There's still a little bit of kind of capriciousness in neurodegenerative stuff, but it's far more manageable and alterable than people think. So you kind of get those four things out, and then you really go into the data. The data is going to tell us if you have something that's related to your job that's super important to you, then we'll put that in the mix. So here's what I also say. A lot of folks listen to me on a podcast and they ask me advice, ironically, less about sort of Humanaut the business. They just ask me about life management because I do consider myself a person that has a relatively perfect life. Now, I'm always quick to say perfect does not mean easy. I take on big challenges. I have lots of things that don't go right, but I've got an ecosystem that helps me manage them appropriately, prioritize them appropriately. So number one, I always say, I got my currency right. Money is not my currency. All this other stuff, the relationships, my family, my wife, all the beautiful things that come from that. Number one. Number two, I do have those connections that when I need something, I can go to them and I can kind of go deep and enjoy it and help them help me. And I always say that the way I think about it is there are times when I'm the best father you're going to meet. There are times I'm the best CEO. There are times I'm the best son, the best husband, but I'm never all of those simultaneously because you can't be all of them. So you got to know when to sort of like lever up one or another. I can't be a shitty husband all the time. There are sometimes I've got to be a really good husband. I can't, by the way, when I'm being the best CEO that I can be, that's a time when I've maybe dialed down the husband thing just a little bit. And I've communicated, hey, Stace, like next 3 weeks, I'm raising money. This is going to be a really deep time, and so give me a little space. She's okay, I got it.
How do you have sort of, I guess, the metacognition or the self-awareness to dial in or dial down on the fly?
Well, part of it is the community, surrounding yourself with the right role models and the right people. If you look at the people I surround myself with, they tend to also be good at modulating those different aspects of your life. I'm married to people, I'm friends with people that are happily married. I'm friends with very successful entrepreneurs. I'm friends with people whose kids you look at and you're like, holy mackerel, those are great kids. And, I look at friends that are giving back and doing things, with all of the wealth they've gathered. And so I do think it's important to try to find people that you can learn from, emulate, and get advice from. And I don't go around asking for advice. Like, I can't remember the last time I said the words, hey man, I need some advice, but it's just natural and organic. I'm in this group we call it the Saturday Tradition on Saturday mornings. It's 20 guys. They're all different walks of life. Some are PE guys, some are just random, working at a company, some own a car wash, whatever. They're just normal dudes. We don't talk about how much money we make or anything, but we do this really hard workout. We follow it with coffee and tacos, and then we go do this thing called Fire and Ice at one of the guys' house where we're doing cold plunge and sauna. During the sauna, we actually do a little bit of a gratitude exercise, and all the problems come out during that Saturday morning thing. Like at some point in some conversation or in some word, who's in trouble. Who needs your help. And other times people just say it, they ask. So if you're not part of something like that, go find something like that. I say to all my friends, guys, about Saturday mornings, you want an invite? Come on, and here's the ground rules. And so find something like that.
There's one thing that I deeply admire about you is, we've not talked about it in the realm of healthcare, and a lot of people don't, is spirituality.
Yeah.
So me coming from Silicon Valley, spending the last 15 years, most of my career there, the one thing is when you have this lack of spirituality, of this higher being, whatever it is, purpose, however you want to name it, God, you sort of start to feel that you're the end all be all after each level of success. Talk to me about the meaning of spirituality and how it's been impactful in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I first thing I'll tell you what I tell everyone that comes to work for me: get your priorities straight. And they say, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, if I have to tell you the order of priorities, then you've already lost. Faith should be first. Family should be second. By the way, pretty close, but and you can debate family versus faith first, friends, and then work. So get your priorities straight. You got to have your priorities straight. Now, what that is not saying is that you don't work hard when you come work with me. Like, there are times you got to know when to dial it up and work hard, but never lose sight the way you prioritize things. That will generally keep you on the right track, and you will be and I always say it's selfish and unselfish. Unselfishly, I want good humans in the world. I want good humans around me. Selfishly, good humans perform better.
100%.
I don't have to look over their shoulder. This whole idea of do what's right when no one's watching, I know that everyone in my company understands that dynamic. It is selfishly a better construct for hiring great employees and getting great performance from great employees. Every now and again, it's a little bit like, all right, we have an unlimited vacation policy, and this is your third vacation with your family in the last 3 months. But you got to be okay with that sometimes. You got to say, all right, but they also work their butt off when they're here, and even when they're on vacation, they're checking, so it's like I just create this really very transparent way I look at things like that. And, church is super important to me. We go to church. It's the most joyful part of my week. There has never been a day that I've gone to church at the church I go to and not walked out those doors and felt better about me, my life, my family, and the week ahead of me. And so, everyone's not going to do that. They got their own version of it. But I would, very similar to you, say, go find your version of that. Because if you don't have some sense of a higher meaning and a higher purpose, purpose, I mean, all of this gets really unfulfilling. Like someone asked me the other day, like, are you really excited about your work at Humanaut? I said, listen, I'm excited about it in the macro, but it's very different. Like the next clinic we open, is that going to be the thing that is like so exciting? No, we've opened 300. Like the 301st is not as exciting, but I never lose sight of the higher purpose. And the higher purpose is really interesting in that when you're doing it well, your clients let you know. And I say it's a hug and tear business. When you get that hug, when you get those tears, when you get that story, it's like, guys, that's what we are tracking. Like of course we have metrics around money and performance, but that's what we're really tracking. Actual health outcomes, human outcomes. When we're doing that well, it's great. And that is a part of having a higher purpose and spirituality in my opinion. And spirituality is a hard one because like you said, people have to define their own, religion's a little different than spirituality and, but
as long as there's something there I found very meaningful. Like my personal experience when my lungs collapsed and I was on oxygen in the hospital. And this happened literally a couple weeks after we sold a majority stake in the company and I had more money than I ever had. My wife was paying the bills up until that point. The first thought was in my head, the first word, God, what have I done? I neglected my family and everything. And if I were to die today, none of this happens. And it's almost like when we came out of the system and redesigned our way of being, it was the 6 pillars that we found consistent and is spirituality, community, and family is a part of that, your first community. And then your mindset, exercise, nutrition, and recovery. And it's funny how everyone who's gone through that journey in some capacity sees those 6 things. And then you start to realize is if I'm dropping the ball somewhere else, the rest of my life starts to go out of whack.
Well, everyone says, everyone in a foxhole and everyone on a deathbed seems to find some spirituality pretty quickly. And it's just a shame that it takes extreme things like that. And so I was very proud of the fact when I did have my accident that when people asked me, what did you change? It was like, honestly, I'm not changing. I'm married to the same woman. That's who I want to be with. My kids, I don't want to change that dynamic. Same friends. Thank God I got a great family that's super supportive. Like, should I have maybe, dialed back some work and things like that? Yeah, I finally came to that realization that I didn't want to necessarily dial it back, but I definitely have a much higher sort of filter for what I enjoy doing. And so as an experienced CEO, I really lean into the things that I'm good at and that are more impactful as opposed to sort of being the minion that's doing everything, because you know how it is when you're starting a new business, you do everything. But as you get more experienced and you can get the right people around you and you can delegate, you can do the high leverage things now, which are the things I also happen to enjoy. So I get more done by being more thoughtful and being more intentional about those things.
And it's also being on a purpose, right? I often tell people is like if you chase money, you'll make very short-term decisions, kind of like Wall Street. You chase power, you'll destroy all relationships, power and control. And I've seen this in my life. The only way to build something lasting, and you can look at every sustainable business that turned into a cult-like brand, is to chase impact at some level, right? Because, and it goes back to the study on kindness towards others versus yourself, in that in a depressive state, in a stressful state, kindness towards others actually reduces the gene expression. Now, shifting into regenerative medicine, which is where you started, right? Like the stem cells help you sort of get better than when you were in the accident, right? Go back to your younger self. How do you incorporate that into the practice? Give us like a 101, everything you need to know about stem cells for people who, we all hear the hype, but we don't know what the reality is, what it does and what it doesn't do.
So the first thing I'll start by saying is stem cells are the building blocks of your body. Nothing sort of happens in your body without stem cells being involved in some form or fashion. We do stem cells, use them for a variety of things. Your hair, your skin, your sexual parts, your joints, your tendons. We have a version through an IV that's a little more systemic because we think that ultimately they can almost improve many, many things in your body. And so the way it works is we typically do an injection in a body part. It tends to be a body part where someone is having pain or a recurring problem. The stem cells do a couple of things, which you're hoping in a very simple layman's sort of approach to it is that you get this sort of paracrine effect really quickly where there's this really strong anti-inflammatory dynamic. That's important for a couple of reasons because that's going to reduce the pain quickly, but nothing gets healed when it's inflamed. And so you've got to reduce that inflammation. So then you can attract all of the things you need to that joint, for instance, to start healing and growing and doing all that sort of thing. So that's the way to think about it. You inject stem cells, you inject some other things around it. Sometimes it's exosomes, other signaling things that calms down that area from an inflammation perspective. perspective, and then you get some quote unquote building and growth of the things that are going to help you heal. And when we see probably, I'd say about 80 to 90% of the clients that we have, we see pretty dramatic impacts. For me personally, and I never like to be anecdotal, but it's the easiest way for me to tell the story. A year ago, I did an injection in my Achilles heel, or my Achilles tendon. For 25 years, I walked around with a sore Achilles tendon. Within 3 days, I have for a year not felt one single thing in my Achilles tendon. Now, that was 100% because I believe there was some significant inflammation in that tendon, that stem cells calmed it down, and now it's sort of had the time to sort of get healthy. It's great. I've done my knees. I told you about my knees. I've done my shoulders. I've done my SI joint in my back. I've done certain discs in my back. I've done my neck. The only thing I haven't done, to be quite honest, is my penis. And we get great results with that. Once again, you got to think of that as a system that requires healthy tissue and blood flow and sensitivity. So, people always laugh when they think about like doing stem cell injections into your penis, but it's important, just like doing it in your knee. And so, people come to us, we do a consult, we sort of figure out who's a good candidate and who's not a good candidate. We always say as a mantra, sell what you should, not what you could, because you're getting people in a very vulnerable state. Now, the thing that we're trying to change about the mindset of stem cells is that it's a last resort. It shouldn't be a last resort. Number one, before you go get surgery, a lot of times, try stem cells. Or before you even get to the point where you're talking about things like that, be proactive about them. So we have, for instance, a lot of clients that are skiers. Before ski season, they'll come and they'll get their knees injected. It's proactive. It's preventative. Then they go and they have a great ski season. Their knees had a stem cell injection at the beginning, and they come out of ski season much better than if they hadn't done that. So a lot of people think of stem cells as the last resort when I'm broken. We actually try to get people in a more proactive approach to it. But we get the acute cases all the time.
Now, there's a lot of buzz in this space, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at it, everyone's trying to optimize. Social media has made it a thing, right? And how do you decide then what you do and when, right? Like you said, a lot of skiers do it proactively. And then also what sort of therapies? Because there's peptides. A lot of them are not FDA approved. Yeah. And there's stem cells. I don't even want to even begin to dive into the process there. So how do you decide when you take stem cells versus when you take peptides? Yeah. And maybe you take stem cells instead of peptides.
Yeah. So there's a whole mix of things that you can do to affect your body and your health. And I think the first place that we start is we have an amazing world-class clinical team. We have experts in regenerative medicine. We have experts in female health, male health. We have experts in sexual health. We have experts in peptides. And so it's got to start with a layer of expertise. All of that, you sort of think of all of that knowledge goes into an LLM so that, it's almost like the AI is not, it's based on something. And so, you now have a set of protocols based on this large amount of world-class medical knowledge and medical expertise. So that's one thing. And it drives me crazy that people are kind of almost forgetting that that's important. And I always say there are a lot of things that you should go to Mexico for or Panama for. Putting injections in your body is not one of them. And so that's the first misconception that I want to make sure I hit. You can do stem cells in the United States. You can do the vast majority of things that people have told you can't do in the United States. You can do your own stem cells. You can do umbilical cord stem cells. You can do other biologics. There are many things that you can do in the U.S. I always say it's an FTC problem, not an FDA problem. The FDA has some parameters around stem cells that you work through, but the big difference is in the U.S. you can't make crazy claims like you can in Mexico or Panama. In Mexico or Panama, you can say anything. Oh yeah, come and get stem cells. It's going to make you completely healthy. It's going to make your brain healthy. You can't make those claims in the U.S. But once a doctor gets in a room with a client, they can have a very deep conversation about what stem cells can and can't do, and then what version of stem cells you would use, whether you would use your own, whether you use umbilical cord, whether you'd add exosomes, et cetera, other biologics. And so it is a very deep conversation. It's a little bit individualized. We don't have a strong opinion on your stem cells versus umbilical cord stem cells. We're agnostic about that. They both work. They both work equally well. Now, you will get stories about, well, why would I go to Mexico? They'll say things like, well, you can get more stem cells there. Well, the reason they say that is because you can culture expand them. So you can take a stem cell line and grow them and grow them and grow them. We would actually say there's some negatives to that. It reduces the quote unquote stemness and the viability of those stem cells. They denigrate as they're expanded again and again. So in the United States, the one thing you can't do is culture expand umbilical cord stem cells. So no problem. We'll give you more naive stem cells. And so you want more? Great. We'll give you more. Now, what should happen there is that should mean that they're more expensive in the US. But because this sort of myth of you have to go to Mexico, you have to go to Panama has been out there so long, I would actually say our stem cell procedures tend to cost less than the procedures outside of the country, even when they're culture expanding the same stem cell line. So I am super complicating or super simplifying it. We could talk about stem cells and what's appropriate, what's gray, what's off limits, but it's once again why you need to come to a place that has world-class experts, a world-class compliance and regulatory leg, and is doing it the right way. And so when should you use peptides versus stem cells? You have to have protocols that tell you. And I would say usually what we do is we use them in a combination. We use things like before you do a stem cell procedure, we do shockwave. Shockwave is like an acoustic pulse into your joints. We have peptides before and we have peptides after. We have supplements before, we have supplements after. We have movement type dynamics that we want you to do. There's all kinds of things that go into it. My biggest issue is people are not thinking about it holistically like that, so therefore they get worse results. The other thing I'll say is peptides is even more interesting to me. I have these very smart, successful guys, and they will literally tell me, hey man, I got these peptides from my buddy and I saved 20%. I'm like, is that what you're trying to do? You're trying to save 20% on your peptides that come from Tijuana? Like, you are essentially going to a drug dealer and taking his word for it. And so what I would say as well is that what Humanaut tries to be is the voice of truth. We're going to make sure we always use great suppliers. We're going to triple test. We're going to test the ingredients going to the compound pharmacy. We're going to test the end product coming out of the compound pharmacy. And we're going to test the products again when they get to our distribution center. That's super important. We're going to make sure we have suppliers that follow all of the regulatory sort of guidelines. We're going to make sure that, a lot goes into it. We're going to make sure when we prescribe peptides to you, it's based on your situation, your personal data. It's not because you heard on a podcast that you should use the Wolverine stack. Maybe. Let's look at it. Let's personalize it, So I think that's the problem. I just kind of tell my smart friends, dude, when you go get peptides from a random influencer and a random dude in the gym, it's no different than going to a drug dealer. Come to a trusted place where there's real expertise.
Most people do a lot of diligence on almost everything else other than
Except
the
peptides.
I think this has to do a lot with herd theory.
Yeah.
Like back in the day, Napster was illegal, but everyone was downloading it. If all your friends and everyone you know are
it must be
buying
okay.
peptides, so it must be okay. And a lot of these haven't been studied in real humans outside the ones that are FDA approved. And so you don't know what it's doing to you in the long term.
Now, what I will say is I don't want to bash peptides because we're big believers in peptides. Peptides are great. Peptides do amazing things. By the way, people have been using peptides and didn't even know they were using peptides. Insulin is a peptide.
Correct.
The GLP-1s are a
Of
peptide.
course.
Peptides are good to use, once again, when you kind of have the right construct for it, number one, but you should be considerate about it. I would also say that there are many peptides you are 100% correct. Most of the studies have been animal studies. The good news is there is now sort of scale. And so BPC, is an example of most of the studies have been on animals. However, millions and millions and millions of people have used BPC. So we can generally say probably pretty safe. We can generally say, given the scale of it, there is something to it. We can say that the animal studies show there's something to it. So you do have to kind of push a little. Like this idea that we're going to wait for a double-blind, FDA-funded, multi-million-dollar study before we try certain things, that's also nonsensical. But I think there is a construct you can apply that is appropriately, rigorous.
Enough testing to figure out the risk reward.
Yeah.
Like back in the day, I still remember back in the day, you go and these people just give you stuff they make at home to fix something, and you take this concoction and it fixes the thing. As a child, I remember. Right? So it's not quite that.
We all had a grandmother that had a secret remedy and things like that. And when your grandmother tells you it's going to work, I mean, to be quite frank, sometimes it just works because she told you it was going to.
It's the placebo.
And by the way, people kind of knock the placebo effect all the time. I'm like, why? If you do something and it works, okay. Like if you had pain, now you don't have pain. Is there some placebo? Of course there is. They used to do in World War II, they did these studies with morphine. And for the folks, they would give them a bag of just saline and say, you had morphine. Those people felt better. They would give other people morphine and tell them it was just a saline bag. Those people didn't get relief. So the placebo effect is real, and studies have shown that. It's not necessarily bad, but obviously you want things that are doing more than that.
Whatever the mind can believe, the body can achieve, right? Now, for founders that are high stress, what is your top 3 recommendations that they need to get in order?
Well, the first thing I would say is like, don't chase the silly stuff first. Get your foundations right. It is movement, nutrition, sleep, and stress reduction. Like, we are very adamant that if you come to us, we are going to start out with the foundational stuff first. Get that stuff right, because that is 80 to 90% of it. And most people underestimate how important that is. And most people overestimate how much work it has to be. It doesn't have to be go run a marathon and go do a triathlon. There's a lot between nothing and what you're doing today and where you can move incrementally to get a little better, a little better, a little better. So we are very foundational at Humanaut. Now, once we get the foundation right, then we will absolutely pull in supplements and hormones. And I would say for guys, especially over a certain age, hormones a no-brainer. At some point, your body stops producing the levels that you need. Everyone then equates it to, well, it's a guy's wanting to be able to have better sex. And that may be true, but it is also incredibly important for your heart health, your brain health, for your energy levels. 100%. Now, here's another difference between Humanaut and other places. If you walked into Humanaut and said, I'm here, I want hormones, give me testosterone. Well, the first thing obviously we're going to say is, well, we got to validate that and we got to do a diagnostic. But just as important, we're going to say, where's your wife? Mm-hmm. Because if you're coming in and you're younger than me, but if I come in as a 57-year-old man and say, fix my hormones, and I don't also say, and here's my wife, fix hers as well, we don't want to be in the business of creating sort of existential bad outcomes in marriages. You fix a man and don't fix a woman who's just been through menopause. By the way, her hormone deal is way more complex than a guy's. You are not solving the ecosystem of health around a person, and you're actually creating bad outcomes. So that's the way we think about it. I would say peptides is another thing that we want you to be thoughtful about it. We don't want you to think about it. You're going to be on a ton of them all the time. Cycle on and off. Let's make sure that it's tied to your data. Let's personalize it to you. It's a prescription, not an over-the-counter thing. You know, there's lots of things that go into it.
But I like the theme there is you optimize the couple, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen this, and this is where decline happens, right? And there's research on this called transactive goal dynamics. When couples treat individual goals as joint, they have better relationship satisfaction and better goal success, right? Like versus most common is one of the partners is an entrepreneur and the other is the homemaker. Yeah. And then the homemaker starts to feel like, I'm supporting you. Yeah. And the other is like, oh, this person is doing me a favor. And after time, that turns into like this power imbalance, right? Yeah. Unless you're like, we're in this together. Yeah. I'm the CFO and I am investing in the moonshot, and you're the founder who's running the moonshot, right? So I'm going to create stability, and you're going to create the agency that'll build legacy for us. And the same goes for your health. Yeah. You got to do it together. Yeah. I remember there were various times where Vivetta and I tried to optimize separately, and it never worked. Yeah. And then over the last couple of years, we dropped over 100 pounds together because now it's family. Yeah. It's a transactive goal we're doing together. But what's even more interesting is the kids see it and they see you modeling it, and they copy you. Yeah. They're healthy. All our kids into athletics and fitness. And so I can't recommend it enough that you optimize together.
Yeah. And you might have a different plan. Like you might be doing some things different than her, but it's like some of it you're doing the same things and some of you are doing it together. It's like, hey, we just had some food. Let's go for a 20-minute walk to make sure our insulin doesn't. So let's go do it together. Like it's just so much nicer.
The walk and talk has saved more marriages than any therapy has, right? Yeah. Like no ego, no phones, and you just bring yourself. The other thing is like it turns it into an ecosystem again of shared food rules. Yeah. So you're eating the same things. There's no like, okay, you get nuggets and I get this. It's like, and there's a lot of research on that meal that you have together is not only important for maintaining the healthy habit for you, but as a family, it's also good for kids' brain development. I think kids up to 8 will learn more from having weekly or daily dinners with their family. The communication skills, language, everything improves way more than school, right?
Yeah. My kids are way healthier than I was as a kid, and they're going to be way healthier going forward. Like, it's changed a lot for teenagers. My son has never had a drink. If anything, I have to almost push him like, dude, all right, come on. You're a teenager. Like, I got this construct of a little bit of Calvin and Hobbes. Like, we got to at least have a Calvin and Hobbes level of mischief here. You got to do a little bit. You're a teenager. But it's also, like, I don't want to be pushing him to try some silly things like that. But my kids are super healthy because they've grown up in an environment where they were around Restore and now they're around Humanaut, and it's internalized and they get it. They will be healthier than I am today because they're going to live it their entire life.
You become the environment. Yeah. Right. And that's very important to set the environment for success that you want to see. You want health, good health with your kids. kids, you have to be healthy. You want regulated kids, you have to regulate yourself, right? They don't do anything different. You can't be screaming at them while asking them to be calm.
I went to a big conference this weekend. I spoke at the Stanford Health, Consumer Health Conference, and it was 4 days away from home. And I took my 18-year-old son with me. And so he's considering Stanford for his college. So he's done all the things to put him in a position to be, worthy of that. But more importantly, I took him to all my meetings. Outside of the meetings, we went on hikes. By the way, we went on hikes with some of the top venture, folks in all of Silicon Valley, and every one of them was so kind. The first 10 minutes, Griff, tell me what you're going to do and where you're going to school and all that. And so I made this business thing also a family thing. And that's kind of goes back to how when you think of it differently, you can make it really fun. And then also while we were out, it's like, okay, now we're going to go get some exercise. And so I'm now with my 18-year-old and I'm his dad. So I want to push him and make sure he knows I still got a little bit of it. And he, of course, is an 18-year-old that wants to beat his dad's butt, so he's pushing me. Just there's so many ways, little fun levers like that. And I tell you, I had the best 4 days. It could have been just a quote unquote another conference where I would have met my friends and certainly got work done. But having my son there and being a part of it and it happened to be a consumer health conference. So he's also learning about that. But it was just, it doesn't have to be a beatdown all the time. Work doesn't have to be a beatdown. Conferences don't have to be a beatdown. Exercise, you got to find ways to bring some joy and fun into it. And for the last 4 days, that's how I did it.
It should be a way of living. And I think this is particularly important if you're raising venture money, right? Because where it starts to go south is you make it a transactional relationship. Now they see you, they know you, the person, they know your values, and they see you embody it. And that builds stronger bonds and connections versus seeing you as a number. Where do you see the biggest opportunities in longevity? What does it look like? What does the space look like with AI taking over and over more and more of the pie? Where do you see it? Do-it-yourself healthcare, all of these things. There's more than $20 billion gone in startups in the last couple of years into this whole DIY healthcare space. Where do you see it all going?
Ultimately, this health optimization longevity space is a multi-trillion-dollar market when you kind of put all the pieces together. I think the very first thing that has to happen is really defining the things that, like what is longevity? What is health optimization? I still think there's lots of dissonance around what it actually is. Our definition of longevity and health optimization is use health optimization because that's a today thing. That makes you feel and optimize for today. By the way, what is longevity? It's taking that daily approach and doing it day after day, week after week, month after month. That leads to longevity. If you go straight to longevity, first of all, young people kind of tap out. It gets a little gross, seems a little expensive. So getting the definitions right, I think, is one big thing. Number two, I think pulling it all together is super important. There are too many sort of one-off pieces to the puzzle. Not enough have been pulled together. Three, I think getting the balance of human connection married to AI and systems is a sort of a big opportunity to get right. There's a lot of business opportunities there. And then finally, kind of finding the right balance of science and good judgment so that you're not chasing charlatan-like things that have been untested, but you're also not waiting too long because the traditional healthcare system lags significantly. So those sort of four buckets are where I think there are lots of opportunities, and within them, then there's 1,000 ideas. If we had a whiteboard, you and I could go to a whiteboard right now and come up with 20 different ideas in the health optimization space for a business.
The main key there is science and human judgment, right? I think AI is only powerful as much as the context you give them, or else the diagnosis it gives you could also be dangerous. So I think that human element is key. Let's take a few questions in rapid fire before we close it out. One health practice you'll never give up.
My workouts. I have a very specific construct. I've got 2 or 3 days that are sort of my strength and mass kind of days. I have a couple days that are cardio days, and I have a couple of days that are fun. And the fun workout days are thing like it cannot be a structured workout. It's generally with other people, but there's some fun component. But I'll never sort of give up my movement and exercise routines.
Love it. Most overrated trend in longevity.
Oh, goodness. I think it is, once again, going to some of these molecules like NAD and all that and thinking that's going to solve the big problems when the rest of your life is a mess. Start working on the fundamentals, get the fundamentals right, and stop worrying about all those other things at the end are great, but not until you get the fundamentals right.
People rely on the 5% optimization and forget the 95 that have put them in the problem they're in.
And also remember, even those optimizations should be personalized. Like everyone thinks, oh, cold therapy and the colder the better and all that. It's actually not true. Matter of fact, for women, for instance, on their cycle, if you go below a certain temperature, it's bad for them. So I'd like for people to get out of this world of cold is good for everybody. This is good for everybody. It's like even those things, which I am the biggest supporter of in the world, you gotta personalize.
You know what's interesting is I've gotten myself into so much trouble in terms of health because I listen to a podcast and then my wife will come and tell me, I told you this 6 months ago or 8 months ago, but you never listened. Right. And so it's almost like you don't respect the knowledge at home. And then I always joke, but Huberman said it. And she's like, I'm Huberman. Just think I'm Huberman, but brown and licensed.
Well, what I will say is this is find people that you trust, find sources that you trust, but don't worship humans in the space because as we've seen again and again over the last few months, they're very fallible. They got their own problems. And I will say it at Humanaut Health, we've gone out of our way to build a system, an ecosystem with lots of professionals and lots of world-class leaders and not made it about any one person.
It's about the system, the process, and not the goal or the person.
That's right.
Most underrated thing in longevity that people don't
Sleep. Sleep's real easy. Most people, entrepreneurs, how many entrepreneurs get good sleep? Once again, think about it selfishly. If you get better sleep, you have better mental acuity, you perform better, you have better energy, you're kinder to the people around you. So get good sleep. It's so much better for a high-performing entrepreneur.
One metric you track the most?
Right now, the one metric I'm tracking the most is my VO2 max. I think it's super important. It's one that's very specific. It's one that you can work hard to improve, and it's one that I'm a little unhappy with right now.
We should have a little challenge going together.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm trying to get to 75 this year. I'm not saying you get to 75, but I'm saying if we train for it, we'll get somewhere.
I'm not going to 75, but I do have a goal that's pretty ambitious.
I don't know if I'll hit 75. We'll see. I'm at 50, so we'll see. Biohacks worth it and not?
Probably my favorite is sauna, followed very closely by cryotherapy. They make me feel good. I mean, sauna's tested at population level again and again. It's a no-brainer. If you can afford it and you have room and you don't have a sauna, you're kind of missing the point.
But a lot of the gyms these days put one in.
They're accessible. And I would also say cold therapy. I'm a big fan of cold, as you know, with Restore. My wife has a company called Chili Box for at-home cryo chambers. So we love cold. We love heat.
One supplement you won't go without?
One supplement I won't go without. Well, based on all my data, omega-3 is, the omegas are sort of what's important for me.
You don't eat canned sardines or any of that?
I do all that too, but I have to supplement that. And then I've got a couple of specific, like Novos is one that I really like. I think that company's really great. It sort of tests or affects 12 markers of aging. So that's one
Novos?
that
And what supplement they provide?
It's not a particular, it's a molecule that addresses 12 different markers of aging, and it's a little pill.
And it's personalized to you?
It's not.
Okay.
But it seems to have incredibly good data. I'm a big fan of the team, their approach.
And it's edible or injectable?
It's a pill.
It's a pill. Okay, you said it.
They've now got gummies and they've got other form factors. They've got a bar, but it's all oral.
I'm going to try that. I'm going to check it out for sure. One health mistake you see founders do over and over again?
They don't recover. They don't dial it back. It's go, go, go. And they're just crushing their sort of adrenal function and all of that. And it burns them out. And recovery is just as important as the work you put in. And recovery comes in lots of forms. Take a few minutes to do a little breathing. Once again, make sure you get some good sleep. If you do a hard workout, make sure that you kind of pay attention to your markers. I mean, it's so easy now to know.
HRV is like
all
some
of
of these things show up long before you end up in the hospital.
That's right. Yeah. So recover more.
Best $100 you've spent on your health?
Best $100 I've spent on my health. Well, I would always say that's a really lovely meal with my 2 kids and my wife. You can go with $100, you can get a healthy meal. It involves not only putting good things in my mouth, but it involves real conversations with the 3 people I care about more than anything. And there's sort of like nourishment for the soul there.
I love it. Jim, this has been fantastic. You warm my heart every time we speak, and you're a very warm, community-oriented person. I'll never forget, I was fairly new, and on a Thanksgiving, we don't know many people here.
Yeah.
And then you invited me, and we went pheasant hunting, and it just, I was a novice, and there were lots of people there.
Yeah.
And you stuck with me throughout the couple hours or 3 hours that we did that hunting, and you were like my guide and my coach, and you didn't even know me. It was the first time we met. Yeah. So if you have that level of warmth towards someone you don't even know and you haven't met, I can only imagine the kind of warmth and love that your clients get. And that's the difference between, I always say, when the world goes buffet, you got to go Michelin star. And that's the love you bring to the people you interact with.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. You have obviously a very infectious contagious enthusiasm. And listen, man, it's been a pleasure getting to know you.